Teammates, we are back once again. If this is your first time listening to the Move Swiftly podcast, welcome to the number one show on innovative teamwork. Great to have you. Shout out to Podmatch again for matching this show up with some absolutely incredible people that have unbelievable stories. To my regular listeners, you already know what's going down. You know what happens when you hit the play button. You get, whether it's just myself doing a solo episode or it's a guest, you're going to walk away with this with something that you can grab onto, something that you can hold on to, just a little piece of positivity, we'll say it like that, that gets you to that next moment in life. It's all about moment to moment. Today we have Scott Ritzheimer, founder of Scale Architects, who has broken into a revolutionary concept in terms of just how founders can go step by step by step by step. And it's as much personal development as I do, Scott. This is the first time I actually saw or seen someone breaking it down into a 7-step process.
Yeah.
We've helped start, I believe the number was 20,000 businesses or something crazy like that. And, there's so many things I want to get into with you. So before I make the intro too long, just welcome you to the show. How you doing today? Thanks for coming on, man.
Aslan, thanks so much. I'm super excited to be here. I get this moment, the beginning of any podcast episode I record, where I remember back to an episode I was listening to. Actually, I was frustrated. It was burning the candle at both ends, like so many entrepreneurs do. I'm driving in my truck on my way to work one morning, and it was one of those days like, if I didn't own the business, I would have quit already, So I was like,
Rich told me
I didn't
earlier.
really want to be there, It's like, and so I'm driving in and I'm listening to one of my favorite podcasts, and this guest comes on. He's got this book called Predictable Success, and he walks through these different stages that businesses go through collectively together. And it was like the guy had a camera in my office somewhere. Right. It was, and he's laying out this progression similar to what I do with founders individually.
Mhm.
And it was the very first moment as an entrepreneur that I felt like I was actually on a map.
Yeah, yeah.
Right. Every other day. And I started the business when I was 20, myself, my co-founder. And so I was pretty young and very dumb. But like every day it
Oh,
felt
I
like we had a map of what was behind us, but what was in front was just the great unknown, and that's really cool for, a couple of years, maybe 5, 10 years. It gets really exhausting and scary when you start stepping in stuff, and it was that season for me where I didn't want to take the next step into the unknown. I wanted someone to actually point me the way, right? Someone has to have figured this out. And I found it in a podcast, totally transformed my life.
yeah.
The highlight reels, it tripled our business's bottom line, not our top line, our bottom line
Mhm.
in a year's time. And the real thing, though, that happened was it set me on a path and trajectory for doing what I do today, and helping other founders to avoid a lot of the headache and heartache that I did, to understand what they need to do now so that they don't have to overwork and slave away, and to an extent hate the business that they built.
Mhm.
And so it's a long answer to your short introduction there, but I hope that this episode can do that for somebody today, to let them know that in their journey, they're on a map and there is a way forward.
Yeah, for me, it was actually, and the point that you make about entrepreneurs feeling very lost, you're spot on with that because so many of us, we don't know where we're going to fit in, don't know exactly what we're going to do with this idea, this burning desire that we have in our heart to share our creativity and know we've been confirmed, it's been validated that the creativity is worth something. And it's like
Yeah.
you will not move forward. You can't move forward. If you can you have a job, you can be very successful, quote unquote. You're not moving forward if you don't really scratch and figure out how to get this creativity out to the world. And for me, the book was actually Outliers by Malcolm Gladwell. And he talked about, because he used, and the reason I'm bringing that book up specifically is because he used a sports analogy. He documented a hockey team that had a leg up on other players that went to all-stars and things like that. And one of the
Yep.
things I've heard you talk about when you start to explain your concept and your framework is you use an analogy that I resonate with very much, being a former high school football coach, being a player, being very involved in football. Yes, we want to go over that sideline and actually go and stop something from stop a player from doing something stupid. So, with all that, why don't you just dive a little bit deeper into your background a little bit and then go into your 7-step process? I want to make sure I give you ample time to get that in and things like that. So the floor is yours,
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, a lot of this I learned again doing it the hard way, figuring it out. Much of it on my own. Had this really bizarre opportunity that sounds completely fake when I say it, but I promise it's true. To help launch just under 20,000 businesses and nonprofits, and when you see anything happen that many times, right? That's a lot of visionary founders. That's a lot of entrepreneurs.
right?
When you see anything happen that often, you start to see patterns emerge. And I remember the first couple of years, folks were taking off, and it was hard, but it was glorious. It was wonderful. And, there was really difficult times in these massive success stories. And then, some of them would break through. And then it was just like they could do no wrong, right? They would just off to the races, and all kinds of stuff would happen. And then started noticing about 4 and 5 years later that these organizations we were helping start were also starting to fail. And I'm looking at it again, just at scale, looking at it, say, why? Like, they looked so similar at the beginning. Why is it that some stall out? Why is it that some fail altogether?
Hmm.
And it wasn't actually until I could get out of the game myself, right? When you're in the entrepreneurial game, it's so all consuming. But when I had a chance to get out, I sold that business, successfully transitioned it to a new set of leaders, just a really cool process. Um, but it was at that point that I was actually able to take a step back and say, okay, what's going on here? Why is it that some succeed? Why is it that others fail? Why is it that the vast majority of entrepreneurs are so overworked and
So
underwhelmed,
I
right, by
want
the
to pause
results?
you there for a second because I want to give the listeners clarity. When you said you sold the business, was the business set up as just a consulting firm that helped these 20,000 businesses or nonprofits? How was the business set up? And then what were the things that you needed to prove to sell? Because again,
Yeah.
going back to a lot of what you said or a lot of what your framework is all about, you never know which phase in the process an entrepreneur may be good. You may be good starting a business, selling it,
Yeah.
and being good with it. So, kind of walk us through that point a little bit.
Yeah. So yes, it was a consultancy. We did a lot of the legal and tax work as well
Yeah.
for companies. So we're getting in at the ground level, helping them structure their organization. Many of them we were building out business plans. We're looking at all of that again, both on the business side and the nonprofit side. So that's what we were doing. We were coming alongside those founders. It was a paid service. We weren't taking like an equity stake or anything like that. It was just a paid consulting, some of it fixed fee, some of it hourly. And so that was what it was. By the time I sold, there were around 75 employees working for the firm.
Hmm.
And what had happened at that point, I was one of those founders. I realized I knew where it had to go. I knew what it meant to be CEO of the company.
Mhm.
And I knew within about 6 months, I was going to be bored out of my mind. Right. So, but I knew that's what the company needed. It needed a strong executive team. And I knew personally, I knew what to do to do that. Fortunately, had some great help and advisors at that point in
Right.
my career. But I was looking at it saying, hey, there's something else that I want. There's another journey that I want to take, and so that's what it was for me. We can kind of dive into that a little bit more. But
Right.
hopefully that answers your question. We're coming alongside those folks.
Yeah. So you make the sale, and how do things happen after you actually make the sale? Because you just mentioned you have employees, you have people that were depending on you, and I'm sure it wasn't an easy
Yeah.
transition when it comes to your business.
Yeah. So here, fascinating thing. There's two parts of the story. The first was the company had originally been started back in 2001,
Mhm.
and I didn't start working there until 2006, very end of 2006, beginning of 2007.
Right.
And in 2007, it was actually sold by the original founder to another company.
Hmm.
He owner financed the deal, and everything looked great. I was kind of a bystander to all of it. I was a part-time employee. I was actually working in ministry at the time,
Oh,
and we all just kind of sat there and watched as the business that he had built, a multi-million-dollar business at this point, was systematically but unintentionally destroyed.
Wow.
Just over 18 months, just about everything that, like, decision that could have been made wrong was made wrong.
Wow.
And the sales dried up, the customer service went through the floor,
Mm,
and it wasn't like anyone was trying to destroy anything, right? It was, everyone was trying to get it to work. Everyone had a vested interest in it working. The new buyers did, the employees did, the seller did, but it just didn't work. And what had happened was, it wasn't a company that was built to sell. It was way too dependent on the founder. It was
mm,
its systems and processes were way too immature to achieve any type of sustainability or scalability. And so when they bought the company, they gave up its best and to an extent greatest asset, maybe even only asset. And I learned more, being in and to an extent bystanding that whole thing in those 18 months than I did when I actually went back to business school later in my 20s.
exactly.
And
Your life
I learned what
Yeah,
not
yeah.
to do.
I mean, because you're watching this thing deteriorate time
Yep.
after time. And then you mentioned working in the ministry as well. So you're seeing a loyal following, but then you're also seeing people that are not doing things the right way. And I'm glad you made that point, because the concept of school is very secure. And there's a lot of people who waste a lot of money just going to school and not knowing what they want to do. But I'm always an advocate of making sure you're applying the knowledge, or you know exactly why you're spending that
Yeah.
tuition money. So you walked into the business school knowing, hey,
Yeah.
you could probably teach the professors a couple of things in terms of
Yeah, it was there was a number of lessons that I learned. It's a painful process,
right.
especially that. Like so the first couple years of my like legit career was
Yeah,
watching a business that I was part of that I loved
yeah.
die. I mean that's really what it was. And folks listening to this, this will ring true when you hear it, but some of the most meaningful and ultimately transformative experiences of our life we would never ask for.
Mm.
Right? Like I wouldn't wish on anybody that the first 18 months of their career would be to watch a company die, watch the company die.
And
But
then
in
you
the
knew
same
the
token, I would
founders,
never
you knew the
trade it for
people,
anything.
you knew the people that
Yeah.
started it. So again, that's a lot, guys. Listen, I'm
Yeah.
like you. I've seen a lot of businesses go under, being in fitness, being in athletics. I've seen a lot of turnover and education and all that. This is a tough process. It's a very, very tough process to actually, take that risk and then watch it over and over and over. Now, luckily for you, you were around people that wanted to see it work. But for me, I've been in situations where the owners were just, really half-assing it, and were not making their calls. They were not doing the things, and they're surprised that their business shuts down. So, it is a huge lesson, and you're right. It takes you further than whatever any business school is going to take you. So
Yeah.
take in the lessons, take in those heartaches, take in all of it, because it's going to lead to something positive if you apply it the right way. And that's really
It's
what I
so
want
true.
to. Yeah, go ahead, go ahead.
Yeah, it's so true. And to kind of catch that in the story,
Mhm.
um, again, about 18 months later, the buying company decided we're going to declare bankruptcy. This is as far as it's over, right? And they basically said if you want it back, the company back, and you feel like you can do something with it, you can have it. That was it. And so the question was, did we actually learn something, right? What's to say we don't go, we build it and it just fails all over again, right? And so myself and the original founder, we got together and took another look at it and said, hey, what have we learned here? Can we do this, right? And we knew that we had to actually build a company. We knew that we had to build the systems and processes. We knew that we had to hire the right people. And ultimately we decided to do it, and it was tough go. September 2008, not a great time to start or relaunch a business, but um, that experience forever framed our approach to building the business, right? It wasn't just about going out and selling a bunch of stuff, although that's a huge part of it. It was about building a business that could sell a bunch of stuff, that could perform the work, that could sustain and grow itself. And so what that did for me, fast forward 14 years about that,
Mhm.
and I was looking at, okay, it's now it's my time to exit. What am I going to do?
Yeah.
And so for the last 2 or 3 years of that time, I knew that we had made a ton of progress, relative to the last time. It was a bigger company, it was healthier, more of the sales were coming from different places. The other founder was almost completely passive. I was in the CEO seat. So the business was running, in many ways without us, but I still knew that it was still too dependent on me as a leader. And I had to find a way of growing the leadership team, moving from what I call a leadership team to an executive team.
Right.
And again, that was a painful process, but it ultimately set the stage for me to sell. And it was the biggest joy of my life to actually sell back into the company to some of the leaders who were replacing me were the ones who bought it.
Exactly.
And a couple of years later, they were up to 75 when I was there. They were up to, I think, 105 a couple of years afterwards, where it just took off with the right leaders for the right stage.
Yes, and I'm glad you're touching on this because you're emphasizing, and I want to re-emphasize the importance of systems, guys. You gotta have yourself a solid system in your business. I understand. I've watched people do this over and over, make this mistake over and over. Is you consider yourself someone that can do everything. Call yourself a business owner. You call yourself an entrepreneur. You have it in you, and you think that you got to work, and you ultimately think that there's going to be a result that's favorable to you. No, your system needs to be working harder than you. All right, I need to say it for the people in the back, Scott. Your system, the system you created that you've put in place, that needs to be the thing that's working harder than you so you can stay afloat and that you can stay in business because we're talking business, but I'm sure as you were navigating your personal life, as you were navigating how you're going to build a family, how you're going to navigate your business and do these things, it becomes
Yeah.
too much that if your system is out of whack, then that's it. Pack it in. You don't have a chance in this business. So you were able to
Absolutely.
codify a system, and I want to make sure I'll read all seven out here for the listeners. Starts from the disgruntled employee, goes to the startup entrepreneur, then the reluctant manager, dissolute
Hmm.
leader, chief executive, true owner, then the visionary founder. I was blown away. This acronym I have for this show, it's skilled, well-informed front team plus LY, lift yourself. And there's been a ton of acronyms, a ton of systems on this very show. So I want you to kind of walk us through, first of all, how you were able to come up with that breakthrough step-by-step
Yeah.
process and
Yeah.
then walk people through, where they should be. Should they get all through? What kinds of things should they be going through when
Yeah.
they've adopted and they try to build out a system in their business?
Absolutely. Well, here's the thing that I started to discover, particularly when I started coaching and consulting with larger organizations as well, kind of
Yes.
medium-sized businesses, 100 million plus range.
Okay.
And I was looking at it, and the founders at that stage had to behave very, very, very differently than the founders did at earlier stages, right? At smaller businesses. And I started to see in them what I could see for myself, what I didn't want to do, right? I don't want to say what I didn't want to become because it's a good stage. It's right. It's necessary for growth, but not everyone has to get there. So let's break this down a little bit further. What those seven names are that you just read out, those are seven stages that every founder goes through. Right? They are sequential. You start at stage one, you go to stage two, you go to stage three. You can go backwards in stage. It's just like being on a plane. Sometimes the closest exit is behind you. Sometimes the best stage is
Yeah.
behind you, right?
Yeah.
So many people come to me, and I'm sure you've seen this as well.
Yeah.
They want to get to the next level, but it's like you don't you don't know what the next level is, right? Like, what do you call it? What's next level called? How's it different from today?
Exactly.
And it's just I want to keep doing what I'm doing now, and I want to be more successful at it. That's not the next level. The next level looks very differently. It requires a completely different skill set, and that's not always the right thing for everyone. So uh, sometimes all you need to do is actually take a step back to a level that fits you better.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's even simpler. Sometimes you just have to enjoy the stage that you're in now more. right? You don't have to get to the next level. You just have to recognize the value and the joy and the level that you're in. So there's
I
7 different
have an
stages.
example. I
Yeah.
want to make sure I give a clear example towards that because I come from the fitness world and I had a friend who was a personal trainer for years, making around six figures, 90,000 just as a personal trainer, but he wanted his own gym. And then he looks at me, he goes, there's a lot of variables that come with owning your own gym. So I'm thinking maybe I could start something and eventually get bought out by a Gold's Gym or get bought out by one of these big box gyms and be good. So his stage was, all right, let me just build something that can get bought out. That was his plan. He had the plan to sell
Yeah.
before. So it wasn't about, okay, I'm going to go beat Gold's Gym and beat Arnold Schwarzenegger. I mean, I'm too late in
Yep.
the game for that. All right, let's figure out how to just get to a point where it can sell and I'm good, happy with my kids, wife, and all that kind of stuff. So
Yeah.
that's kind of a practical example of what he's talking about. But go
It's
ahead.
so good. It's so good. And some people have that right out of the gate,
Yeah.
right? And if you do, hang on to it. It's a tremendous value. For some people, that's actually not necessary. All you have to do is know, your vision for the company, is it big enough to force you to go to the next stage, right? You don't have to worry about stages 5 or 6 or 7 way down the road. You just have to make the decision, do I want to move from stage 2, where it's me and maybe a couple people helping out, to stage 3, or now I have to manage a team, right? There's a lot of folks who never need to grow their business that big.
Yeah.
And that's okay. It's not failure. It's not lesser than. It just because you stay in stage 2 doesn't mean you're worse than the leader who makes it to stage 3. It doesn't work that way.
Hmm.
Each of these stages are just kind of cities on the map, right? And you find the city that you love and you hang out there. It's not a problem. So they're each different stages. They're sequential. You start at the beginning and you work as far as you want to.
Hmm.
You never have to go beyond what you want to. But if you want your business to grow, if you want your nonprofit to grow, there will be a size for that business, a level of success that will demand that you reach the next level, right? One of the things that happens and why it's so confusing for founders is that when you succeed in a level, right? When you either intentionally or unintentionally do the right things and you do them well enough for long enough, you will necessarily be thrust into the next level, right? The complexity in the organization, the amount of success, all the things that come with that, the number of people that come with that,
Hmm.
will demand that you change as a leader to continue to succeed. And the real reason that I wrote the book is I wanted people to be able to recognize when it changes,
Hmm.
so that they don't have to just keep doing, because here's our natural response. I had
Yeah.
to do all of these things to succeed. Now I have to do these things as well. And so we just add and add and add, and we wake up one day totally ticked, right? It's like that moment that I had is like, I would have quit if I didn't own this thing, like it's just more, there's no more left to me to give. Why is it this hard? Well, the reason is that you're hanging on to a bunch of stuff you actually don't need to be doing anymore, right?
Right.
Or you've adopted some stuff from the future from other people that you like and respect and admire that you don't have to do yet. The
Right.
beauty in knowing what stage you're in right now, what stage your business needs you to be in, is there's 2 or 3 things that you have to do really well. That's
Right.
it. And so if you find yourself torn between 20 or 30 things, you're doing it wrong. And you're probably doing it wrong because no one told you anything else.
Right. You actually beat me to the next question I was going to ask you because you're right. We're programmed to go from first grade, second grade, third grade, fourth grade. We accomplish this, high school, and then go to college. We're accomplished to go to this next stage. And we have to be kind of unlearn and reprogram to really get what you're understanding, what you're saying in terms of these stages they're not up levels, they're just certain parts on the map. All right. How do you go about explaining that to people who have gotten into this and have that system that I just referred to? For them, that's a successful system. For them, they look at school and say, okay, I accomplished this, so I need to do this. How do you go about explaining it to that founder, to that CEO? Look,
Yeah.
you don't need to do all that. How does
Yeah.
that happen? Because I could see a lot of clashing going on in regards to that. I've been a
Absolutely.
part of those conversations myself. So
No, totally. Here's the difference. When you're going through a school system,
mhm.
someone else define what success is. Someone else defined the 4.0. Someone else defined captain of the team. Someone else defined your scholarship amount. Someone else defined your position. When you're founder, No one else gets to do that for you. You get to do that for you.
Mm-hmm.
And to the extent that you give up that authority, to the extent that you let someone else decide what success means to you, right? You give up that power, you are left with nothing but the choice to move forward, right? You're living someone else's life. You're playing someone else's game and achieving their version of success.
Facts.
And the reason this is so important is I talk to people on a daily, weekly basis who have pursued someone else's success for 10, 15, 20 years. And they get there and they hate it. They hate it.
Yes.
And they're massively successful, right? They've got the money, they've got the business, they've got the, and so not only do they hate it, they feel bad about hating it because it's like, I got everything that everyone told me that I should have.
Yeah.
Why am I having such a big problem with it? And so that's why for me, one of the very first things I do, regardless of what stage you're in,
Mm-hmm.
is sit down and really work out, what do you want? As founder, as business owner, as CEO, your organization should go in the direction that you want it to go. And so we take some time to get really clear on what their vision is for their company. And it's not always bigger, right? But it is always better.
Yes. What are some of the tactics that you would recommend for educators and people that are dealing with kids on a daily basis? And, because again, they're nowadays, I think with the internet, with the information popping up and the amount of information that's out there now, I even actually was speaking about this on a previous episode, is the idea of having a boss is not like it used to be before the internet, because you as a boss or you as an employee, if that relationship is not intact, people are getting on LinkedIn, they're getting on Facebook, they're doing whatever, and you're not gonna have that dictatorship authority over
Yeah.
people anymore because we have
Yeah.
access to the internet. What are some of
Yeah.
the ways you're able to kind of tactfully teach this to young people so they get it? They're like, look, I'm the founder, it's my vision, and I want to actually pursue something I specifically want to do.
Yeah. I would say there's so many answers to that question, and frankly, I'm not a big education person, so this is just a business person's take on education. Um, the education system in general is generally woefully inadequate for visionary founders. In fact, the vast majority of them, if they succeed in school, it is despite school, not because of it.
Yeah.
And the reason for that is what are the gifts and skills that are needed to do this? It's an ability to see it differently, right? To see 1 + 1 and think, maybe there's a different way to look at this,
Mm-hmm.
right? But that's not what school is for, right? That's not easy from a teacher perspective. You don't want everyone questioning what 1 + 1 is. You want them to just answer 2. And so there's a point where it just doesn't prepare us
Mm-hmm.
to challenge the assumptions, right? To challenge the way that things are thinking. Now, the equal but opposite problem with that, and I think where it really lets them down, is because it is so pushed to the side of compliance and consistency and answering the what I just told you. It never really helps founders develop the underlying skills that they need to break the rules,
Exactly.
right? To break rules effectively, you have to understand what they are,
Mm-hmm.
right? Otherwise, you're just breaking things, right? You're not actually building anything constructive. And so you get a lot of founders who have to learn this the hard way, that you do have to understand the rules of the game, right? Great musicians know the theory behind music. They know the rules
Yeah.
so well that they know when to break them.
Yeah.
And I would say, from an education perspective, I think we need to make space for that. We need to
Yeah.
make space for breaking the rules. But in doing so, it's not just anarchy. We also have to help our kids understand that there's a reason for the underlying framework as well.
Yeah, and I think the term that you just excuse me, that you just used, that is kind of moves us in the right direction, is breaking rules effectively. All right. It's important that we teach breaking rules is not so much a bad thing if you're doing it effectively. Again, I teach at a school named the Center for Creative Education. And it's crazy, just got because there's some kids who have gotten older. I would say a rule, and they're like, "Wait, remember, Mr. Aswan, so and so can't do this activity." And I'm thinking, oh yeah, you're right, that can't happen. So even though they may have been quote unquote talking back or not following rules, they're understanding this one has a learning disability, or this one, isn't doesn't know this kind of math. Like I'll do a math game with them. It'll be a fifth grader versus I don't know, third grader. Like remember, third grade didn't learn multiplication yet, so I got to do a different problem. So if we can kind of create that habit, and I believe it's, and you may be able to confirm this yourself too, if we can create an environment like a Google where they have people sitting around all day and just thinking of problems and doing something, then we begin to at least create a system in which people have the mindset of breaking rules effectively and doing things that are going to lead to a positive outcome. So,
Yeah.
with all that, I do want to be very respectful of your time, Scott. Can you just tell people a little bit about just what's next for your business and how they can get in touch with you, and where you see it going? I know I mean, you being the visionary that you are, the way you teach vision, I'm sure there's a very tight vision that you have in your head. So feel free to talk a little bit
Yeah.
about it.
Absolutely. And I think the main thing for us is I love seeing, take a big step back here. I love seeing healthy organizations,
Mhm.
right? I've been in healthy ones, I've been in unhealthy ones. And uh, the biggest byproduct of this founder's journey is the organization that is dependent on them. And
Yeah.
when we have founders who are off their game, when they don't understand where they are, when they don't understand what they need to do to help their business or nonprofit succeed, everyone in that organization suffers because of it, and their families suffer because of it. Their communities do as well. And so for me, I've got a vision for making thriving organizations, and I found that the best, most effective way of doing that is starting with the founders who are leading the way. They're
Mhm.
the ones who can create the most change. They're the ones who can create the most opportunity. And frankly, they're the ones who have one of the hardest journeys to walk, and they need the help doing it. So we're on a mission to do that, to make this simpler for founders so that they can build brilliant organizations that are going to change the world. Um, and there's a couple of things that we've got to make that easier for folks. One is you mentioned the Founders Evolutions, the name of these 7 stages, and wrote a book on it. And that book is actually available for free for anyone who wants it. So they can
Yeah,
download a
yeah,
full copy of
hey
it.
man, listen, you're a Move Swiftly listener. You're getting free gifts, man. We got a couple people
That's
that
right.
have come on and given
That's
up.
right.
So appreciate you, man. Appreciate you.
Yeah, so they can get it at scalearchitects.com/founders. And yeah, you can see what all 7 stages are. Something that's really important about this. One, if you feel like, does being a founder have to be this hard? Right? It's a great sign that you could benefit from the book.
Hmm.
Folks who've written back to me after having taken the book and implemented it, discovered the 2 or 3 things that they need to do, and actually started getting rid of other things, save on average 10 hours a week.
Yes.
10
Yeah.
hours a week
Yes.
on stuff that they
Makes a
didn't need
huge
to be
difference.
doing anymore.
Yes. Yes.
So it's a short book. You can read it on a single flight. You can read it in one sitting, and it's guaranteed to save you a ton of time. So I highly encourage folks to check it out. Scalearchitects.com/founders.
Excellent. And is there a way of reaching out to you if people want to get in touch with you? Is that the website you put out there? Like, is there?
Yeah, if you head there as well, there's an opportunity. You can schedule a call with me. You can find me anywhere. I wish it was as simple as saying, look for Scott Ritzheimer, but I'm a junior, so there's 2 of us. I have to
I
say, look
looked
for the
at it, but
Scott
I saw
Ritzheimer who looks
that.
like he's 14 years old. That's the
Yeah.
one. It's
Yeah.
you'll find me there. But yeah, if you check out again scalearchitects.com, there's plenty of opportunities to connect with me there. Find us on social media, either Scale Architects or Scott Ritzheimer, and you'll find some great information.
Excellent, excellent. So, Scott, the thing I do to close out all the shows is I want you to use your imagination a little bit. You are back, I believe you said you were 20 years old or 19, that young Scott that was, going through it, watching this company deteriorate. You were working in the ministry, you were kind of going back and forth. Pretend that that version of you has come into the Zoom room. Give him some words of encouragement, and we'll officially close.
Yeah. So I was so guilty of this. At early 20s, I was guilty of it all the way through. And I had to go back to talk to my past self, tell a story about myself in between there.
Hmm.
So 25 years old, we had our first son. His name's Benjamin. Awesome, awesome kid. And I was kind of like, I loved him to pieces. First son makes you a dad. It was pretty cool. I had no idea what to do with him. It was kind of the first 2 years, 3 years of his life. I was like, I love you. Here's your mom. It's kind of give him back when he can chase a ball or something. We'll have a great time.
Yes.
And same thing with my second son. He came on along a couple years later, and it was kind of the same thing. And about 10 years pass, and we had our third child, our daughter Isabel. And in that span in between, my middle son Liam and Isabel, a whole lot of life and death happened for our family, and just everything in between. I was a different person at 35 than I was at 25.
Mhm.
And I had this opportunity to do it again. I had the first couple years of her life, and I realized I didn't want to let those 2 years go by just because I was better suited to later years.
Mm.
I didn't want to miss out on everything that those first 2 years had to offer. And so I just kind of set myself, like, I still, wasn't all that equipped to help during that stage, but I just set myself to having joy in every moment of it. And, it's kind of funny. My wife has these pictures of the monitor, the baby monitor, of me sleeping on Isabel's floor, just night after night after night, because we'd be reading or like holding hands through the crib, and I would fall asleep.
Right.
And let me tell you, Aswin, I had more joy over those first 2 years of her life than probably the past 20.
Yeah.
And what I realized in that is joy doesn't come from some destination that we're trying to get to. We don't have to get to the next level to be okay.
Yeah.
We have to be okay to get to the next level, right? And joy comes in the moment, in the present, and that's what I would want my younger self to know.
Yes, success is it's in the journey. All right. I've said that so many times on this show because I think it's so very important. Right now, the transformation, the insight, the breakthrough that you're having, enjoy this moment. Do not look past this moment. Try to savor it because I'm telling you, they go very, very fast. So again, Scott, appreciate you, man. Keep doing the work you're doing. Need more people like you. Everyone out there, fellow teammates, continue to move swiftly. We will talk more soon.